Hello again, Steve here with a few comments I'm going to call how people stay the same while we change, right? Now, this is a tendency I've noticed, and I can't hold it against people for not changing if I change or somebody else changes or whatever, because maybe they're not on that path, maybe they didn't make that agreement within themselves or with others and so on. So it's pretty hard to knock them on it, but it is an interesting thing to notice. And sometimes people don't change because they don't think about it. Other times they don't really change um, fundamentally because the motivations of what looked like the change were not what they were. An example would be the anti-war left. I can remember back in as recent as the Bush administration in the U.S., where even all around the world people were out marching against the war in Iraq, which made a lot of sense. I mean, a lot of people were on board with that, left and right. But then what was interesting was that once Obama got in and over the course of his presidency went on to drop approximately 100,000 bombs on the in the Middle East and completely destroy Libya and basically Syria. Um, I don't know where the anti-war left went. Like I don't know where the hell they went. So it means to me, or my gut tells me that they didn't really care about the war. That didn't really matter. What it was they just hated anything to do with what was perceived to be the right. That's all. So it wasn't, so as long as their guy was doing the bombing, they could give a fuck about a million Iraqis or Syrians or a bunch of people who were fleeing wherever they're fleeing from. They could give a fuck about them because if they did, and what they thought they were doing with George Bush actually worked, and they would have done the same with Obama, right? They would have left their partisanship aside, but they were vested in this idea of power for the leftist oligarch um, at all cost, and to hell with what he's going to do. It doesn't matter if he drops 100,000 bombs. It's he's got the right stripe in their mind. So that's an example of how people will change, but they don't really change in a way because I think what their heart was the same at the time. It wouldn't have mattered if it was Obama who went on the shock and awe bombing campaign of Iraq. The media, the leftist media, and the media, the leftist marchers wouldn't have made the big fuss because they demonstrated not to do so once their guy got in and went on the same bombing rampage for 8 straight years. So that's an interesting one. The next one that I'm going to talk about is how people will appear to change because with the anti-war left, they appear to change, but they don't really change, right? They don't change with the new situation. Um, Another one is the tendency of people to drop their religion and to pick up something else and just be, and I don't know if they're aware that they're exactly the same, they're the same sort of approach, but just under a different stripe. I know a guy who used to be some sort of a religious minister or whatever it was, and at some point I guess figured that was the wrong. It was all a bunch of BS that he was teaching. So he dropped it and picked up some sort of new age approach. And to me, there's the only thing that's changed is the information, but the fervor is the same, and the fabrication or the nonsense of what's being taught is the same. So it's an example of how it appears as though there's been a change, but there's not really a fundamental change because the behavior within there is the same, right? In the same way that the anti-war left was appearing to be doing one thing and then appearing to be doing something else, but deep down inside, the motivation was probably fairly constant. And that's an interesting one. Another one I notice is in the anarchist community or the ANCAP community, when these are people who, of course, by the nature of their of the term anarchism. They don't ascribe to the value of government. They ascribe to the idea of self-ownership, which makes a lot of sense, actually, to me. It really does. But what it seems to result in is the rejection of anybody else who has a contrary opinion in terms of the level of government which is acceptable. Where you'd think that a reasonable person would say, okay, if somebody was over here who believed in a lot of government, and then they somehow believed in less government, the anarchist would say, well, hooray, this guy is on the right path. But they seem to want to reject any form of governmental change. So, for example, I thought that even though I would categorize myself as having great degrees of anarchistic leanings, no question about it, because I think that government is, as we know it, is probably one of the, if not one of the most, maybe the most dangerous religion the world has ever seen. So therefore I would automatically say, yeah, that's probably not a great idea. However, people who are leaning towards, so for example, if it's a question of during the election between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, even though, I don't care for Donald Trump's liberal democratic ways, his socialist tendencies, even though I don't like his big government approach, even though I don't like his militaristic warmongering approach, it seems to be less than what Hillary Clinton had. So it's, in other words, if I don't like slavery, but I see a trend towards the guy who used to own 1,000 slaves and treat them like shit, and now he only owns 10 slaves and he treats them very well, well, I'll say that's an improvement. Though I can't condone that behavior, I'll still say it's an improvement. That's kind of the approach. Whereas the anarchist is going to say, nope. The purist is going to say, no, that's not going to work either. So there's always going to be the rejection, complete rejection, unless it's 100% fundamentalism. And this I noticed with, it was a guy that, once again, I can't agree with everything he does and his lifestyle and his behavior and so on, but he does have some good value to say. Is good, and he goes by the name of Durian Rider on YouTube, and he's a vegan, which is more of a strict type of vegetarian, right? They don't eat any kind of animal-derived products. And he made a comment one time that, he's been doing this and he's been an activist for this cause for probably about 20 years, I'm guessing. And he was saying that the people who are no longer such have gone back to just normal eating or whatever. What he's noticed is that they were the fundamentalists. They were the ones who would criticize you for, eating a fig because it might have the leg of a wasp in it or something. And meanwhile, they're not thinking that, you walk through the field anywhere to go pick your strawberries or whatever, you might step on an ant. I mean, how far do you take these extremes? I think you do the best you can, but that way you can hold out for the long run. So, I don't know. I think it's the tendency of people to maybe want to change, or maybe to appear to want to change. I don't know what it is, really. But they fundamentally stay the same. And this is why I think when we approach people and movements and the motivations of what people are doing, it's a good idea to have a little bit of a cap of skepticism on as to why they're doing something. It's not necessarily just because they say they're doing something that is the reason why they're doing it. And it's the I don't know, the deep down intent, I guess, for change. Change is not, I don't think, that easy for most people. So a lot of times people take on pseudo changes instead of fundamental changes. They don't like the religion, so they adopt another religion, but nothing's really changed because it's just somebody's formula for another somebody's formula. They haven't actually processed it themselves, right? The same with the anti-war left. I mean, everybody's saying, hate this guy, So they go out and protest and hate this guy. Then everybody who says, love this guy because he's a socialist, or so he had a socialist stripe. He's got the right party behind him. So love him and don't ever mention his war crimes. You know, it's really remaining the same. It's going along with whatever is the, and it all comes down to, basically, it all comes down to lack of individual critical analysis, I think, of what's going on, and then the lack of well, cowardice for sure, but the lack of confidence and courage to stand up and stand behind one's own beliefs. So, for example, if the anti-war leftist was to say, well, hang on a second here, we were all protesting against the war, and we all agreed that the war wasn't a good idea. They got this new guy in, and he's continuing the war. Well, why the fuck are we not saying anything about this guy? You know, that would be independent critical thinking. So would the guy who was religious, who saw this, you know, saw that all bunch of nonsense going on in his religion. Why would he just adopt somebody else's formula then? Why wouldn't he actually analyze it and come up with it and say, okay, there's benefits here, some of that I can keep, some of it's not necessary, I can reject some of it, and basically create his own kind of religion or philosophy based on his own analysis rather than adopting somebody else's. And, you know, the same with the anarchists. If they were to say, yeah, you know what? As long as the path is going in the direction that I want to go in, if I see somebody who's gone from big government believing to say, okay, let's reduce it down to more efficient, that's a big hooray. And I'm going to support you because you're moving in a direction that results in greater freedom, which is what I'm after as well. Rather than just say that, blanket them all, you believe in government, you're full of shit, you know? So, and the same with what Durian Ryder is saying. He's got a good point. I mean, to try to be a complete fundamentalist because somebody said over here that you should not eat a fig because it might have a leg of a wasp in it, then I can never eat another fig again because that's potential. I mean, while not thinking about, well, every time you sit down, there's a little mite on your ass that you crushed. I mean, how ridiculous is that? So I think it's important for all of us to just be, to rather than just follow some sort of fundamentalist platform that somebody else has put forward and some ideas, and just to get along with the crowd, to actually put our thinking hats on once in a while and consider, you know, why it is that we're changing. And when we look at that, we can maybe then, you know, by asking questions, we can get some answers. And that can be very important for us because now, well, it's about truth, right? It's about truth, it's about freedom, it's about the ability to be honest with ourselves and honest with others. And yes, there's going to be disagreement at times, and yes, there's going to be people who reject us, and yes, it's going to be uncomfortable at times. But hey, if life is worth living, it's worth being honest about, and it's worth being honest to ourselves and to make choices that are true to ourselves. So I would say that, you know, many people are going to stay the same as we grow. And a lot of people are going to pretend because they want to go along to get along. Pretend to change, but a lot of people are just not going to change. And you know what? That's probably fine because, you know, we can't change others. We can only change ourselves. So in the meantime, let's just grow as what's important to in the best we can, and encourage others to do so. But at the same time, if they don't want to come along, that's fine. That's fine because we can't change them. That would be my assessment, anyways. So please like, subscribe, and share, and comment in below if you have any comments as to how this can be improved. This discussion can be improved. Steve, you're getting great chatting. Talk again soon. Bye for now.